This beautiful game is featured in Fischer's my most memorable games of 60 games, and rightly so because Fischer is playing against William Lombardy, who is a Catholic father, and this is a Sicilian on the board. And after d4, the pawn is captured, and knight captures the d4, and knight to f6 is played, the normal Sicilian move, attacking the e4 pawn. And instead of bringing your knight here, which is a natural defense, this pawn push to f3 is played, making this the prince variation of the Sicilian defense. So after that, a knight comes to c6 and pawn push to c4, and pawn is now pushed to e6, giving way for this dark square bishop to develop and to castle on the king side. Knight to c3 now, and bishop goes to e7, and after that, bishop to e3 now. So this earlier pawn push prevents this knight from jumping here and attacking this very good dark square bishop over here, which could create a battery with the help of the queen and launch good attack on the king side. So castles on the king side. Fischer is playing with the black pieces, and knight retreats to c2 now, and pawn push to d5 now, attacking the pawns on the e file and the c file. And the c pawn captures the d5 pawn, and pawn captures back, and knight captures the d5 pawn. A better move would be to capture it with your pawn over here. So knight captures the knight, and queen captures the knight back. And instead of going for the queen exchange, Fischer places his queen to c7. So queen now goes to b5 because this rook to d8 move is coming, threatening the queen, and the queen goes to b5 over here. Bishop to d7, creating an extra attack on the queen, and rook to c1 is played by William James Lombardy, and after this, knight jumps to b4 here. So there is an a discovered attack on the queen over here. The queen cannot go in and take this knight because it's protected by the bishop over here. This knight is under the threat, so the natural move is knight takes this b4 pawn, and after that, the rook is captured by the queen, and the bishop captures back, and after which the black can capture the bishop back. So here, this particular knight was hanging. At the same time, this bishop is also hanging. So white chooses to move the knight to d5, placing it in the center in the strong outpost of the pawn. And now this bishop is hanging, and bishop to h4 is played instead. And after that, the pawn push is played, and instead of because the bishop is hanging, first the bishop is captured, and the king captures the bishop, and the bishop retrieves to d8 here. So as of now, white have a very good pawn structure on the board. The knight is in a very strong position, the position where it's most powerful, using this pawn outpost. And bishop to d2 is played by white, and rook comes to c8 on this open c file, and bishop to c3 now, developing the bishop and looking at the king pawn, and also preventing this rook from developing through this open c file. So pawn push to f5. The simple looking move messes up the pawn structure, because if this pawn is captured, the rook will capture back with an attack on the knight. So instead, e5 is played because e5 is basically forced here. You could even bring your king up the board here. So after e5, rook comes to c5, attacking the knight, and the knight retreats to b4. It's not a good idea to bring your knight towards the side of the board, but it was better to bring it here to the f4 square. So bishop to a5, attacking the knight, and pawn push to a3, supporting the knight, and after which the bishop captures the knight, and the pawn captures back with an attack on the rook. So rook to d5 now, and after which the king comes up to e2, also activating the rook in case the rooks get double up on the d file. So king of Fischer moves to f7, and after that, pawn push to h4, and king moves up to e6, blocking this pawn, which is not obstructed by any pawns now and could be a dangerous pass pawn. And once this pawn is pushed, we will still have a nice little pawn structure over here. King comes to e3 now, bringing the king up the board, and rook to c8 now, and after which rook now comes to g1, and this bishop is basically preventing these rooks from activating over here, and rook can only go up to c4, and it goes up to c4, preventing the entry of the white king into the center and into the black's territory. So rook to e1. This is the blunder which is played by William James Lombardy, which allows Fischer to capture this bishop with his rook. And because once you capture this bishop, this pawn was basically guarded by this particular bishop. So once the rook capture it with a check, you're forced to capture back. And once you capture it, the pawn is now taken back. And after the king moves away to d2, the rooks are exchanged, displacing the king back to the back rank, like into the first rank. And then Fischer's king is already close to the center, and it goes up again to d5, and after which king to d2 is played. A better move would have been to push the pawn over here, which would have prevented this pawn push, or even the pawn push would be advantageous to white over here. So the king again goes up to c4, and after which the pawn push of h5 is played, and pawn push of b6. You could even play b6 or a6 in this position, and king moves to c2 here, and g5 now, and h6 is now played, pushing the pawn. The best move here is to do the en passant here, capture this pawn, and after the pawn is captured, you still have one more pawn move over here. So f4 is played now by Fischer, and basically here f4 is played, and after which the pawn push, instead of going for the capture, pawn push to g4 happens, and a5 is played, attacking the pawn structure um, on the king guarded side, and after which the pawn is captured, the pawn captures back, and king moves to b2 here, the closest square, and pawn push a4 prevents the king coming up over here, even if black move the king out of that particular blockade. So king goes to a3 now, and Fischer can just grab up this pawn, and once this black pawn is grabbed, Fischer just brings his king closest to the pawn structure, and like basically as of the earlier position, William Lombardi signed the game and Fischer won the match, because after the following moves, this pawn is gone, and this pawn will be queen, and the game will be over pretty soon. So because of that, he resigned as of this position, and Fischer won the match. So very calculated moves, and one mistake was all it took for Fischer to gain advantage in this particular match. So thanks for watching. We'll be back with more such videos.